The lake was calm that morning, its surface shimmering with sunlight as though nothing in the world could disturb its peace. I had chosen the cabin for its seclusion, for the way the pine trees shielded it from the chaos of the suburban HOA battles I had been dragged into for months. It was supposed to be my refuge. Yet peace was never something Karen allowed anyone to have. The first sign of trouble came in the form of heavy footsteps echoing against the wooden deck. It was far too purposeful, too aggressive to belong to. A hiker passing through. Then came the rattling of the door, a sharp jolt that reverberated through the cabin walls. Before I could react, the door swung open, and there she was. Karen, HO president in all her misplaced authority, standing in the entryway as if she owned the place. Her arrival wasn't accidental. She had tracked me here. Rumors had spread within the HOA that I was planning something that could unravel years of control she held over the neighborhood. The lake cabin was private property, far outside the HOA's jurisdiction, but Karen's arrogance knew no boundaries. She stepped in with the air of a self-proclaimed enforcer, determined to confront me on her terms. Inside, she scanned the cabin as if searching for evidence, her eyes sharp and suspicious. What she didn't realize was that she had walked in on a meeting far more significant than any petty HOA dispute. At the rustic wooden table sat the U.S. District Judge, reviewing documents that outlined a history of misconduct within Karen's association. The timing was almost cinematic, as though fate had chosen this moment to expose her audacity. Karen froze, her confidence faltering as she realized who else was in the room. The judge lifted his gaze, unimpressed, and the air grew heavier with unspoken judgment. Karen had crossed a line that could not be undone. But Karen never admitted fault, never backed down. She began to speak rapidly, gesturing wildly at me, at the papers, at the judge himself, as though she could bend reality with sheer force of will. What she didn't understand was that her intrusion was exactly the kind of behavior being investigated. Every aggressive step, every word dripping with entitlement, only added weight to the case forming against her. Still, she didn't stop. She stormed deeper into the cabin, her voice rising as the judge quietly observed, making mental notes. I could almost feel the walls of her empire crumbling around her, but Karen was too blinded by rage to notice. The lake outside remained serene, in stark contrast to the storm brewing within, and that storm was only beginning. The next chapter reveals how Karen's intrusion escalates into a legal showdown, as her HOA empire begins to unravel piece by piece. The silence after Karen's tirade was almost deafening. The judge's presence had shifted the atmosphere, grounding the chaos in a cold, immovable reality. Karen had expected intimidation to work, as it always had in HOA meetings. But this was no HOA meeting. This was a federal judge, quietly cataloging every offense. Her face tightened when the judge finally spoke, his tone measured, his words deliberate. It wasn't anger that struck her. It was authority, the kind she couldn't vote out or silence with a fine. He reminded her, in no uncertain terms, that trespassing was not only a violation of law, but a direct insult to the integrity of the court proceedings he had agreed to oversee. Karen's bluster faltered, but she quickly replaced it with defiance. She declared that everything happening here was illegitimate, that I was conspiring against her, and that she would not allow the HOA's power to be undermined. It was a desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative, but the judge's patience was already wearing thin. The documents on the table were damning. Records of excessive fines, selective enforcement of HOA rules, misuse of community funds, all tied back to Karen's leadership. She had spent years building a fortress of fear within the neighborhood, punishing anyone who dared defy her. But now, that fortress was cracking. The judge gave her one final warning. Her actions were under scrutiny, her leadership was on trial, and her very presence in this cabin without permission could be added to the list of grievances. Karen, however, had never been one to heed warnings. She stormed out, slamming the door with a force that rattled the windows, leaving behind an echo of her fury. Yet, her departure was not retreat, it was preparation. That night, as the judge and I discussed the next steps, the lake grew darker, its calm surface hiding the turbulence beneath. Karen would not accept defeat. She would rally her allies, summon every ounce of influence she had left, and strike back harder than ever. But this time, she wasn't fighting a neighbor. She was fighting the law itself. The next chapter uncovers Karen's retaliation and how the neighborhood became a battleground of loyalty, fear, and power. Karen's wrath spread quickly, like fire through dry grass. By the following week, the neighborhood was buzzing with rumors and threats. Karen had painted me as the villain, the outsider trying to dismantle their community. She stood before crowds at the clubhouse, rallying homeowners with fiery speeches about protecting property values and defending the HOA's honor. But cracks were forming in her support. Some residents had grown weary of the constant fines, the invasive inspections, the way Karen seemed to treat the HOA's funds as her personal treasury. My case, though still confidential, had begun to leak in whispers. Homeowners wanted answers. Karen responded with intimidation. Letters appeared in mailboxes, warning residents of consequences if they sided against her. Security patrols doubled, cameras went up overnight, and a chilling message spread. Karen was watching. Behind the scenes, the judge continued his work, summoning witnesses, compiling evidence, and preparing the case for court. Each document revealed another layer of corruption. Embezzled funds, fraudulent elections, and even backroom deals with local contractors, all tied directly to Karen. Her desperation grew. Late at night, she confronted neighbors in their driveways, her voice carrying through the quiet streets. Some caved under pressure. Others began to secretly reach out to me, offering testimonies, recounting years of unfair treatment. The tide was shifting, though Karen refused to see it. And then came her boldest move yet. She called an emergency HOA meeting, demanding a vote to increase fines and expand the HOA's authority. It was a last-ditch effort to tighten her grip. The meeting turned into chaos, with residents shouting over one another, some standing with Karen, others openly defying her for the first time. The neighborhood was no longer just a collection of homes. It had become a battlefield. The next chapter reveals how Karen's empire begins to collapse when the case finally reaches federal court, and the judge delivers his decision. The courtroom carried none of the noise of HOA meetings, none of the theatrics Karen thrived on. Here, the rules were written in law, not in agendas Karen had crafted to her benefit. The judge presided with authority, his robe a symbol of a justice Karen could not manipulate. Before him lay the mountain of evidence, bank statements, testimonies, emails that revealed Karen's machinations in undeniable detail. Witnesses took the stand. Neighbors once too afraid to speak, now emboldened by the chance for truth. Karen attempted her performance, her voice rising in righteous indignation, painting herself as the victim of a conspiracy. But every word rang hollow against the evidence displayed. The courtroom was not her domain. Her control, once absolute, dissolved with every passing hour. The judge listened patiently, then spoke with finality. Karen had overstepped, not only as HOA president, but as a citizen bound by the law. The HOA would be placed under receivership. Karen was to be removed from her position, her financial dealings audited, and her personal accountability pursued. The words struck like a gavel to stone. Karen's face drained of color, her empire dismantled in a single ruling. She had spent years wielding power unchecked, and in the end, it was her own arrogance that delivered her downfall. The neighborhood sighed in relief. The fines ceased, the surveillance quieted, and the clubhouse became a place of community once more. The lake cabin returned to its silence, untouched by the chaos that had erupted weeks before. Karen, however, was left with nothing but the ruins of her reign, her intrusion into the cabin forever etched as the moment her downfall began. The storm was over.